Okay, geweldig. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, she'akol niyeh b'dvarim.
Amen.
We are up to write the first word on, I believe, that Hey Amud Aleph. And we're going to learn about, I'm sorry? I believe so. Yeah. We're going to learn about Ravina's issue that he had with Runya. Ravina and Runya had a love-hate relationship. And we're going to soon see the issues that they had. So we just discussed the halacha of the halacha of someone who was surrounding somebody on three sides, and then he made again. And the fourth side, when and how he could demand that his neighbor, the Nikaf, chip in. So we have a story that's related to that. Runya, he must have a right of access. That one thing, or just because I have a feeling four sides of yours, maybe I'm missing one thing. Yeah, I guess there must be some type of a gate and some type of access. That's a good point.
What about that family? No. But it says that if there was a fourth thing which the Gemara is talking about,
well, the Gemara doesn't say if I had a field adjacent to his fourth side. If I built a fence that covers fourth side,
right.
But the fence would have an entrance gate in it. Yeah. So Runya Akfe Ravina Me'abru Choshen. Runya was Ravina's neighbor, and Ravina surrounded him from four sides. Exactly a case similar to what we had yesterday in the Gemara. So Ravina made gates, as Rashi says. Dalet Sadois Hayul Ravina, Sevivois Arba Mitzarav Shel Runya, the Gadron, and Ravina made a fence there. Amarle, so Ravina went to Runya, and he told him, Havli, Kama, the Gadri, give me the amount of money to pay for half the fence. Who is that consistent with? So Rashi Rafuna Libid Rabbi Yosy, like Rafuna Libid Rabbi Yosy, Damar Akolufi Mashagodar, because the other Mandamar held, I only have to pay for half of a chain link fence. The Hachi Kaimalon Kadamuch, we're soon going to see that Halacha Lamaisa, we paskin that the Nigav has to pay 50% of whatever the fence that was built was worth. Lo Yahiv Loi, Runya refused to pay. So Ravina already, I'll try and do Tatin with Acheverman. He knows it's not going to go easy. So he said, at the least, Havli, Lefikonim B'Zoil, at least give me 50% of what a chain link fence will cost. Lo Yahiv Loi, he told me I want it. So then he said, at least Havli Agar Nitirusa. At least give me what the Gemara says, give me the money that you would have had to pay a shomer. Lo Yahiv. Okay. And his claim was, I didn't benefit from what you've done. I don't need shmira. I don't need shmira. I'm not giving you any type of money. Yom Echad, one day, Ravina noticed that his neighbor Runya was cutting fruit off his decal, cutting dates off. Ravina quickly told his oris, Zil shkol minei kibur da'ahini. Go grab a bundle of dates. Also, lasuye, as the oris was approaching the tree, ready to take some dates, Rudy says, "What do you think you're doing? Get out of my property!" Rama Beikoli started screaming at him. So Ravini says, "Busted." Amalei Golis Daitach the Meinach Nichalach. Now I see that you are happy with the Shmira. For Haraya, you got very upset. You protested, you scared, you shoot away the oris wanted to take. So Vaisach, you need Shmira. And therefore, Lo Yehei Ela Iza Ba'alma. Even if there was no people coming to attack, just animals that would come and eat your parish, you're makbid on them. Mi loy boy nitirusa. Wouldn't you have to have paid for Shmira? So at least give me that. Amar lay, Runya was a tough cookie. He said, no. Iza ba'alma lav lach luyabai. For just for goats, I don't need gates. I'll just scream at it. If I see an animal, I'll go boo, shoot, and I'll scare them away. So I don't need to spend any money. You still need someone to do that shoeing. What if you're away? You'll still have to hire a shomer. So you see, you're admitting to me with your actions that clearly you needed this fence, and it's a value to you. So this Runya was a tough cookie. He didn't want to pay. So what happened? Also, Lekamei the Rava. He took him. Finally, Ravina said, we gotta go to Rava. Amalei, you know what Rava told him? Zil paise b'madefais. I strongly suggest that you work this out with Ravina and you make him happy. Because if you don't, v'loi the ininach loch dina kirafuna libed Rav Yosy, and I will make you pay half of the full value of this expensive fence. And Tosha speaks out. He wasn't expecting what? The Eloi the inlach Rav Huna al libed Rav Yosy. Zogt Tosfos, don't think this was an over-the-top threat. When Rava told Runya, you better be mafayis, otherwise I'm going to make you pay full dollar, he wasn't threatening him. Because if he was threatening him, he would have used a different type of language, as we see in other Gemaras. Right? You find sometimes in the Gemara, if you don't pay him, I'm going to take away, I'm going to seize your property to pay him with it. I'll give you a whack in a way that it doesn't make you bleed. So since it doesn't use such an over-the-top lotion, it just says, I'm going to make you pay full pop, that is not because it's going to knas of some sort, not a threat, because that's the actual halacha. Shmuel said, Lahani de mezavni asa, people who sold hadassim, we like to buy each hadas that it's not snipped on top. Each hadas is an individually grown stock. So, and those are difficult to acquire, and they're expensive. We know what we pay for the pre-packaged hadassim. They're quite expensive. So Shmuel will tell them, Ashvuz v'naychu, give fair prices, don't rip them off. Because the Eloi, if you don't give fair prices, Tashinin and Lechuk Raptarfin knows you're even allowed to use hadassim if the top is snipped off. And those are easy and cheap. So if you don't go easy on the price, I'm just going to tell the olim not even to bother buying those expensive hadassim, and you'll lose your whole business. There also, he didn't really pass like a tarfin, but he was threatening them. But not over here. From here it's mashma, but we pass in halacha lamaisa like Rav Huna, as Rashi just told us. It appears Rashi. You better work it out with something. Mashma the minadin hoyelo yoiser. It's mashma that what Rabba was telling Runya was really Ravina is entitled to more money. But if you can work it out with him, so then I don't have to paskin. If he was nisbayis, then you're going to drop the suit, and I don't have to paskin to you what the halach is, because he'll take away his suit, he'll drop the suit. So therefore, Tosfos says that is psak halacha. We pass it like Rav Huna or Rav Yosy. In fact, that the nikav has to pay 50% of the getter that was built, even though it's way above the minimum. Of all four, I think. Yeah. Like that is how Rav Huna and Rav Yosy learned. Zok Tehiluk Gemara. Because if you remember, the very first shot in the Machlokes was that Rav Yosy was like Rav Huna, and the Chacham mode you also pay all four sides, but you only pay like a B'chia, you only pay the half of the value of the chain link fence. Right? That was the first shot in the Machlokes, the Gemara. Zok the Gemara, another story with Runya and Ravina. And the question that we're going to have to keep in mind is this story time? Are we sharing all the stories that ever happened with Runya and Ravina? Because there's a lot of stories in Shas with Runya or Ravina. If you remember, in Bava Metzia, Runya was an Oris. He was the Shasla of Ravina. So he worked for Ravina too. And he did a bad job and he messed up. And Ravina threw him off the property. And he went crying to Bezin, he threw me off the property. And he didn't even warn me. And Bezin told him, too bad. If you messed up, you deserve to be thrown off the property. That was the discussion we had about Bava Kama. So it doesn't share that story here. but does share this story, so there's something special about the story that we're going to have to understand. Runya Zovan Ara Amitra Ravina. Runya bought a piece of land that was a bar mitzvah with Ravina. So Sava Ravina Lasluke, Ravina thought that he had the right to send Runya away and take the land from him. Why? Mishum the bar mitzvah, because the law is the bar mitzvah is allowed to seize the land from the loikeach and just pay the loikeach what he paid. Amalei Reb Safra Bereid Reb Yeva Ravina. Amri Inji, the Velt says, Arba Letzala. There's several pshatim in what this means. One pshat means Runya was someone who made straps. He was involved in the shoe business. So Rashi's first pshat is Arba Letzala, to a poor guy who makes straps, Arba Letzala. Even if he's rich, he needs the same amount. In other words, what Reb Safra was telling him is, you, Ravina, you're Kedai, now you're wealthy. He's a poor guy. So have Rechmanis on him, instead of enforcing the responsibility of Asisa V'Yashav V'Toiv, for you to have the Din of Bemetra, he's a poor guy, do a little bit of Asisa V'Yashav V'Toiv towards him. Now that's going to be somewhat difficult to understand, because we never learned that there's an exception to the Din of Bemetra because the guy who bought it was poor. So we learned if she's a woman, right, there's an exception, but we didn't learn that someone who's poor has that exception. So let's see Rashi, and then Tosfos is going to have a slightly different shot. Zokt the Heilige Rashi. Reb Safra told him, let him keep it. That's what Reb Safra said. Yeah, so let's see Rashi, and then we'll see Tosfos. Arba Letzala v'Arba Letzala. Ani Shemati, I heard that Salo is a Raton Oni, and that Salo is a Raton Osh. The Kach Omar Lord. This is what Reb Safra paskined for Ravina. I see he had different Rabbanim. He had Rava was a Rav of his, and Reb Safra was a Rav of his. I don't know why he didn't go back to Rava. Rava ruled in his favor last time. He should have went back to Rava. He was on a good roll with Rava. But instead he went to Reb Safra, and Reb Safra ruled against the Kach Omar Lord. This is what Reb Safra told him. Arba Kikrois Shrichen Naratan Oni L'Machalos Beisoy Liyon. Guess what? An Oni has the same expenses as the usher. He also has to feed his family, and therefore he needs the money. The same claim you have against him, that he should give you the property because of the bar metra, because of the Torah's commandment of Yosy Yoshev Atoiv. I'm telling you the same thing, Ravina. Asa Yoshev Atoiv. La'oniza, do good for him, and don't throw him out. Talk to Rashi, I don't like this pshat so much because Taich is wrong. The Yesh Lagangam. The Ha'iver, the Ha'or Karu Tzala. You know what Tzala is? Tzala is the hide, V'loy Ratzon, and not the person who works with the hide, not the woman who works with it, not the tanner. So you can't Taich that Tzala means a poor tanner. It means the hide itself. Kedarmin ba'alma, my dargish are so the tzala. It's a bed made out of hide. So therefore, the pshat that we said is null and void. So what does it mean? Runya was a tanner. What he would do is, he was not a tanner, I apologize. He was a merchant who dealt with hides. With Venoisen, I'm sorry? Well, yeah, because that's typically what someone thought. That's correct. Venoisen Oris Labdonim, Lasis and Minolum. You got it from Rashi, right? He would invest and buy hide, and then he would give the hide to the tanners to make shoes out of them. So, in other words, he was a manufacturer of shoes. The Kach Amaloi Reb Safra Ravina. This is what Reb Safra told Ravina. Ha'ani zeh scharai mu'ut. He earned so little. Shahu tzarech lito in schar harbe lavdonim. Besides buying the actual raw material, he then has to spend a lot of money in labor to give the tradesmen to produce those shoes. The Amri Inchi, the Velt says, Arba zuzi l'tzorech mekach ha'or. So that's what it means. Arba l'tzala. If the arba zuzi l'tzala is l'schar ha'avdonim b'hainu tzala. That's what the Fichach say. Yosher v'toy. Look, he has such expenses. So what did he sell a pair of shoes for? $8.50, $9. It cost him $8. So he's making so little. He struggles so much. Be lenient with him. Let him keep this field. It should be a parnasa for his family, even though you're the bar mitzvah. The lean there is a Rashi. Dalet l'tzalo, dalet kikros tzarich le'abdon oni. You need 4 kikros to give an abdon who's an oni. The dalet l'tzalo kamokin dalet l'tzarich abdon nosher. So that's going back to the first shot. Umatalu keneged runya. It's a moshel keneged runya. Shahayalo yisada achas v'soich sada shorvin. So now Rashi is saying he's changing a little bit. We're not talking about Runya came along and bought a field that was adjacent to Ravina's field that he had no connection to. Rather, Runya was also involved over here. K'da Amar La'il, so what Rashi is saying, and Tosfos is going to bring it out more clearly, is this is not a random story with Runya and Ravina. This is a continuation in this same scenario where Ravina had surrounded Runya's field with his fields. In that particular case, the Ravina Akvei Ma'arbu Chaysov, the Achshav Konaloi Soda Eitzel Meitzer Ravina Umavsik Soda Ravina Meitzer Doisha. So imagine you have a sod in the middle that belongs to Runya. All the 4 fields around belong to the sod in the middle is Runya. All the fields around belong to Ravina, and then just past there, Runya bought another field. So who is the bar mitzvah of that field? Ravina, not Runya. Runya has Ravina's field in between his field and the new field that he bought. So he's not a bar mitzvah, but he's close there in the vicinity. And there, Ravina, Sheyasa Yosher Vatoy, Laniach Lerunya, Oisa, the Akshav Yelishnaim, at least now we'll have 2 fields. Shekamoy Shetzarach Shmira, Lishnei Sadois, Gam Kem Le'echad. Basically, if he's watching 2 fields or 1 field there, and the fields are relatively close to one another, he will be able to save money because of economies of scale. When we come at the Varim, there's many things where you have to, it'll cost you the same to process 1 field as a wheel 2 fields, and therefore, if to Runya Mistaker, he'll be able to have less expenses, and it'll help him get a little bit ahead. But at the end of the day, Rashi learns Tzavra was appealing to Ravina and say, don't enforce your rights. Of Armetra, this is a poor guy. That's how Rashi learns. Tosfos actually disagrees with Rashi. So let's have a look at Tosfos. Arba l'tzala, l'perish akuntris, makshir Rabbeinu Tam. A big kasha. Ha'ein merachem in bedin. You can't have rachmanis. The dying can't paskin because it feels bad for the poor guy. That's called corruption. So how is it that Reb Safra would paskin wrong just because the guy's poor? Another problem for Tosfos, the Omar Savar Ravina L'Sluke. Savar Ravina L'Sluke would indicate that Ravina was wrong, right? He thought he should do this, and Rav Safra told him you're wrong. Mashu Shatar Ravina. But in fact, the way Rashi learns, Ravina was right. Ravina was right. Rav Safra asked him, Rav Safra wrongly asked him and paskined against Halacha because the guy was poor. But Ravina should have been right. B'yoid Ma Shayich Kan Haimaisa. What in the world does this story have anything to do with our discussion in our Gemara? Are you telling me the Gemara is just trying to share other stories that Ravina and Runya had together? Well, if that was the case, it should bring the story that we had recently at the end of Bava Metzia. Runya Shasla the Ravina Hava. That was the case where Runya did a bad job and Ravina threw him off. Or or when the Gemara in Bava Metzia discussed the story with Runya and Ravina, the Gemara there should have quoted these stories. If that's what we're doing, just sharing all of the chronicles of Runya and Ravina. V'oid did Tzala, who are, this is a kasha to Rashi. Tzala is or. It doesn't mean a poor ratzon. Could I mean on my dagish arsha the Tzala, right? That was Rashi's kasha as well. Well, Rabbeinu Tam said, the Zovan Ara Amitzra the Ravina. Rabbeinu Tam says that he bought land that was a Mitzra Ravina. What does that mean? Hainu Ametzer Oisam Sodois the Akve Ravina my Abaruchos. Ravina had surrounded him, and he bought a field adjacent to that. What happened was, it was a case similar to the case we had before. Ravina surrounded a field on three sides. The fourth side belonged to Runya. And now, so Runya is a neighbor on one side, but Ravina was a neighbor on three sides. So it's not exactly the case we had, but it's very similar. That's why the Gemara would bring it over here. So Runya was a bar metra, and Ravina was a bar metra, but Ravina was a much bigger bar metra. There's 4 b'nei metra, one lives on each corner, right? The Kadam Chadinai was of them. Instead of them equally splitting the property, right, which we said that's what you do, one went ahead and chapped it ois and bought it. My dezavan zavan, we do not reverse that sale. So if that's the case, what is Ravina's claim b'chlal? One of the bar metras, meaning Runya, bought it. So Ravina should have no claim at all. Because Makayim Sava Ravina, and now that's why it says Savrua. Ravina thought wrongfully that he would have a right to trump the din of the bar metra of Runya with his stronger bar metra. Why? Mishum shoyim metra migimel stadin Runya rak meruachach. Since he was a triple neighbor and Runya was a single neighbor, Ravina thought that gives him more rights of bar metra, and he was wrong, and that's why it says Farua. And on that, Omar Lei Rab Safra Amri Inshi Arbol Etzala Pirish Laor Godoil Tzorech Litin LaAbdin Dal Zuzek Vidal Letzala or Katan. So now he's touching differently. Tzala is a small piece of hide, and Tzala is a large piece of hide, and Tzala is a small piece of hide. Once you've given this to a tanner, he's going to charge you his minimum for both of them. So you're going to end up paying the same price to process a small piece of leather as you would to process a large piece of leather. Why? The process is the same, the labor is the same, so you can charge the same amount. Hachanami, so too with the land. My time of din de bar metra. What is the reason why there's a din de bar metra? Mishum sheyiu kol sadois of smuchen. We want someone to have all of his fields contingent. So when he plows them, he doesn't have to set up the rig in one field, then put it on a flatbed, slap it over to another field. No, he could just plow one straight line, right? So the benefit for you having this field as a bar metra is no stronger than the benefit to him. You're both saving that you don't have to float, you don't have to put it on a float to move it. And therefore, Ravina was wrong, and Rav Safra paskined halachically like Runya, and it wasn't having rachmanis, and therefore not paskening halach. Rabbi Avram Pirish, the hach ar de zovan Runya, a metra Ravina, this land that Runya bought that was neighboring Ravina's field, hanu a metra the oisen sadois show you Runya oris behen. This is going back to the story where Runya was also an oris on behalf of Ravina, and maybe he bought a field adjacent to the field that he was an oris on. Kedarmino and Runya shachal Ravina have it. Even though Runya doesn't have partnership rights or ownership rights in a neighboring field, but Lamaita, he's doing work in your field, which is a neighboring field. We would consider him also with the schos of din de bemetra. So that is the so there the comparison is the same way you're giving favor to the owner of the property if he's a neighbor, so too you're showing favor to the person who's doing the work on the property, and he should also have a din of the barmet. So basically we have three shatim at the end of the day. Either he was ruling with Runya because he was poor, or because he also had a din of the barmetra, because he was connected to it on one side, or because he was an oris. So those are the three different shatim we have in Runya, in the Runya Ravina saga. Gewaltig. Zogt the Heilige Mishnah weiter. Kaisel, oh, I forgot to say something very important yesterday. I forgot. It's really important. It's such beautiful stuff. And I try to absorb it all. And I have it playing at 1.5 speed. So sometimes I forget. We were discussing yesterday Baba Ben Buta's guilty conscience because he gave Hordis the opportunity to have a schus in the Beis Hamikdash, right? And he had a guilty conscience. That's why I always want to bring in Asham. So there's a story in the Gemara. We remember the story. We'll all remember the story where there was a guy from Bava who married a woman from Etzrol, and their dialect was slightly different. It's an Amelia Bedelia story. This is mamish an Amelia Bedelia story, and he told her, "Bake me a bean," and in Bava meant bake me a dish made out of beans, made out of lentils. But in the way she understood it, because she was from, I think, Eretz and he was from Babel, she thought it meant bake me one lentil. So she thought it was weird. So he comes up for dinner, he washes up, he sits down, and there's one lentil on his plate. Are you out of your mind? She said, I don't know that. She told me, bake a lentil. So the next day he said, bake me a lot of lentils. And that nusach meant, in his language, a geschmack portion. In her language, it meant the whole house. So he walked and he opened the door, and there's lentils falling at the front door. He said, what are you doing here? Well, you told me to fill up the whole place with lentils. This is mamish an Amelia Bedelia story. So then he got very angry at her because she was making him a shiggun. So he said, go bring me, I don't remember what he used, but it was something of food that he was asking for, but in her language it meant neiros. So she brought him 2 neiros, 2 oil lamps. And then he says, take these and break him on the gate. Break him on the Bava. So she went outside. Bava Ben was there outside, pasking the halacha, and she busted him on his head because he said, "Go bust it on the Bava." This is mamish Amelia Bedelia. For sure, the writer of Amelia Bedelia learned this Gemara, right? And then he said, "Excuse me, do I know you?" Bava Ben turns to her, "Excuse me, do I know you? You just busted 2 lamps on my head." She said, "My husband told me to do it." So he said, "Okay, Sean buys. I won't get involved. Okay, I'm not asking nothing. I'm happy that you broke your lamps on my head. I'm happy you're not my wife. He's living with you." So that's the end of the story. It's a crazy story. You should go bust them. And I said it's a motnamais. But there are those who learn that they were people who were upset at Baba Bambuta. They were upset at him their whole lives. The oilam was upset at Tyson. How do you give the schus of building the Beis Hamikdash to such a low life like Hordis? So there was an anti-Baba Bambuta sentiment. So it actually made a little bit of sense. She wasn't a Amelia Bedelia. She thought her husband was a shtickle kanoi who wanted to beat up Baba Bambuta for giving him the opportunity to reestablish the Ner Torah and the Ner of Talmidei Chachamim. That's what we learned yesterday, right? It was either the Ner Torah that he wiped out, so the Eitzah was to reestablish the Ner Torah, or he killed the Talmidei Chachamim that are Einei Shel Yisrael. So she told him how to reestablish the Einei Shel Yisrael. So those 2 Neiros were symbolic of the 2 Neiros that he took away from Klal Yisrael, and now you go and give him an opportunity to build a Beis Hamikdash, go break him on the head. So she wasn't such an Amelia Bedelia. There was a method to the madness. It's a beautiful stickle. I forgot to mention that. That's the Shemaka punchline. Where does Shuli Bornstein come up with this? He comes up with unbelievable tires. This is he quotes it from somebody. Yeah, but I remember I heard it from him. It's hard for me to remember the whole Yichas brief. When he speaks, I have to focus. I usually listen to him when I'm driving. So when I'm driving, I have to focus and try to remember whatever I could. And I don't write it down, so I have to memorize it. Okay. Zogt the Heilige Mishnah weiter. Kaisel Chotzer Shenofa. If you have the kaisel of a chotzer that fell down, so we had this discussion. It was already built between 2 shutfim, and now it collapsed. You could force both shutfim to rebuild it, but you could only force them to rebuild it up to 4 amasai. If it was a bigger kaisel than that you cannot force the shutfim to rebuild. But what happens if the Toveya, the person who paid for the fence, comes to me a week later after the fence was built, and he says, pay up. And I said, what do you mean? I paid already. The halacha is, he has to prove with Adam that I didn't pay. Because it's Becheska Shanosan Ach Yavi Rai Shalai Nosan. And Rashi says very simply, since it was already due to have been paid, the assumption is that I paid already. And therefore, you have to prove, if I didn't pay, you have to prove that I didn't pay. Zokt Rashi, right below the word Mishnah, I made it on my own. My neighbor didn't want to pay his fair share. And now, a week later, I wanted to pay half. And the neighbor says, what do you mean, I paid already? And then when he's believed, unless the Tevea can prove that the fellow didn't pay. Why do we assume he paid? Given the since there's a chiyuv on the neighbor to pay, and everybody knows it, everybody knows that the neighbor has to pay his fair share. Therefore, there's no way he would have ever laid out the money. He would have insisted, as they were building, that neighbor goes with him 50-50. Now you want us to believe you that you paid when you shouldn't have, and now he pays to pay you back. You need to prove that. What happens if, it's sort of going back to what we looked about Basra. We had this quoted there. How about midalad amos ulamayla? Let's say the wall was more than 4 amos, and it fell down, and I want to rebuild it as it was, which was higher than 4 amos. There ain't the chayv and you're not mechayiv the neighbor to rebuild the wall more than what's required for the Hezekriya. That's all he obliged himself to originally. But what happens if he builds a wall of 8 amos? And again, I paid for my fair share of up to 4 amos, but the additional cost to raise the wall to 8 amos, I didn't have to pay, and I didn't pay. And now this freeloading parasitic neighbor who didn't pay his fair share of the upper side of the wall says, hey, what a great idea. What I'm going to do is I'm going to build another wall 8 feet away from the wall that he built. That'll be the same height. And I'll put a ceiling over it. Now I have a house and I have a free wall, which is what all the Arabs did on the Kaisel, right? They used the Kaisel as one wall of their house, and they just built 3 walls around it. So that's what he figured he'll do. So Samach leKaisel Acher, even though he didn't even yet put a ceiling on, but we already know what his intention is. So we already know that he really does want this wall, its extended version. Now we don't let him freeload. Now we're going to make him pay 50% of the whole wall, even that part of the wall that's higher than 4 amos, because clearly he wanted. Well, Haraya, he's using it for his new house that he's intending to build. But if a week after he put up the second wall, the neighbor comes to him and says, pay up, he can't say, I paid already, because there's Becheska Shaloi Nason Ach Yovi Raishon. There it's incumbent on him to Megarai that he paid. Why is that? The chiv to pay came already. Zokt Rashi, Becheskas Shaloi Nason in Bar Rishon V'Tavel Din La'achash Shesamach Es Kaisel LeKaisel Rishon. After I already exposed myself and showed that I like this because I built a parallel wall to it. Now he tells me, give me 50% of the cost to raise the wall to 8 amos. And now this parasite neighbor said, no, I paid already. He's not neman unless he has Adam that testify, in fact, that he paid. Why is that? Because we don't assume that he paid. You know why we don't assume that he paid? Unlike in the first case, where everybody knows you got to go 50-50, here, not everybody knows you got to go 50-50. So he might not even have been aware that he has to pay. So we can't assume that he paid. Until he's dragged to Bezdin, which is right now, where the neighbor is claiming, you owe me the money, he would surely not have had paid. Okay, those are the 2 halachas in the Mishnah. Zoktei the Gemara, Amar Shlakish. And this takes us into a whole new sugya of a kaveyas man lechavei. What happens if I borrow money from you? I borrow $100,000 from Mechi, and Mechi tells me, I'm lending you the money you have to pay back by January 1st, 2025. And it comes January 1st, 2025, and Mechi says, can I have my money? Well, I tell him, what do you mean? I paid you in August. The halacha is einonam. I'm not believed. I would have to prove that I paid in August. You know why? Because nobody pays early. Ulavai sheyifrim is manlai. Halavai you'd pay on time. No one's paying early. So there's a chazaka, a person doesn't pay early. And since there's a chazaka that someone doesn't pay early, I'm not believed to claim that I paid early. However, Rabbi and Rabbi argue in Mishlakish. The Amrit Tavayu, they say, Avadinish, the par bekav's money. Begav zimne, a person will pay early. Why? Because let's say I owe money. Nobody wants to owe money. I'm afraid I'm not going to have the money. So sometimes what you do is zimne the misrama leisuse. He'll come into some money and he says, Amr Israel Ifra, let me go pay right away. I don't want to take any chances. Why? Ki hechi, turning on Tamid Beis, ki hechi de loy litradan, so they shouldn't come after me. He shouldn't come after me later that I owe him the money. Let me just get it off my head. Let's see what Rashi says at the bottom of Amud Aleph. This is a massive sugya, as you can see from the Tosfos. Okay. So that is the machlokes. The machlokes is, would someone pay early? And not all chayvus are created equal, as we're going to see. A regular malvan loiva, would he pay early? Abai Rama said, yes, a person would conceivably pay early because he wants to get it off his plate and he doesn't want to have a situation later on. Hopefully we'll have some time to learn these Tosfos because they're very integral to the basics of this sugya. Because if you remember, we had this shaila before. Remember, we had the shaila about a father who died before the baby was 30 days old. Can we assume that he made a pidyon ben? And the Gemara says, if he died before 30 days, we have to assume the pidyon ben was not done. How come you don't take Echad the pidyon over there? That's why it's gotcha. How come you don't say, if he has like 5 coins, let him pay the coin? This way it's opposite. Yeah, but you could do it early. Yeah, you could do it early. So because it says until you have a ride that he paid. That means if you had a ride that he paid, it would work. So Tosha says there's a very big difference because the 5 shloim of coin is a moment in the tovim. I'm not worried that someone's going to be harassing me later. No coin's going to harass me. I can give it to a different coin. But when there's a malav and a loiva, there you have the svara that I'll pay early. So there's a lot of different variations of how this could happen, which will impact how we pass. But let's have a look. Then we learned. We have a shaila over here. Will a loiva pay early? Let's see if we can bring a raya from our Mishnah related to the shaila. Tanan we learned if it's 50% of the wall up to 4 amas, we assume that I paid as soon as the wall was built. So what happens is we finish the wall. And now he's coming to claim. And I say I paid already. We believe me that I paid already because I know I had to pay. So I would have paid as soon as it became due. So when you tell me I didn't pay yet, you have to prove I didn't pay. So what is the precise details of the case of the Mishnah? If what I said, when you said pay me half the wall, I said I did. I paid you as soon as you finished the wall, which is the time where it become due. As Rashi says, when you finish the wall, that at that point it's triggered that I have to pay half of it, and that's what I pay. If that's what I said, Pshita, the Cheska Shanasa. Do I need to Mishnah to tell me that in that case we assume that I gave it? Of course it's Neman. Zok Rashi, Pshita de Neman. Sherezu Taina, Mani Libiotcha, a lawyer may not be klum. So I take it of Koil because it was due already, I paid it, so I don't know your penny. So why do I need to Mishnah to tell me the Chiddush that here I'm believed? Elo, you know what the case must be? It must be that you know what I told him? I didn't pay it then. I paid it while you were in the middle of building the wall. I paid it already, which would have been before it became due. According to Rish Lakish, I shouldn't be believed to say that. Because according to Rish Lakish, there's a chazaka, and a person never pays early. Yet our Mishnah says that I am believed to say I paid early. Alma Avadinish, the Pari B'Sachs Mami. So you have a kash on Rish Lakish, Arai, Tabai, and Rava, that someone in fact would pay early, because I'm believed to say that I paid early. Zok Gemara, Shiny Hacha, there's a very big difference. When you're paying early, in the case of the wall being built, you're not really paying early. Because the Choshafa V'Shafa, Zimnehu, every row of bricks that he puts on, and he has an expense, I should be paying right then and there. I have a right to wait till he pays for the whole wall, and then I should reimburse him for half as it comes due. So that's why I believe to say I paid early, because it's logical that I should have paid early. But in the case of a milva, where it's not due until January 1st, 2025, there's no way I'm going to pay this in August. Tashma, let's try another raya from the Sefer of our same Mishnah. If it's a case where I didn't assume I was going to have to pay, because I didn't know that I have to pay for the extension, even though I parasited off it and I built a parallel wall, there, if I say I paid already, you don't believe me, I would have to prove, in fact, that I paid if I claim that I paid. Hey, what is the case? Ilema, if the parasite, I call the guy who built the second wall, I call him parasite. But Ilema, the Amr Lake, Praticha Bismani, if I said I paid you after, as soon as I put up the wall, which then triggered Achia for me to pay for half of your whole wall, if I paid then, am I like, why shouldn't I be believed? Everybody, even Shlokish told you believe then, because I'm not paying early. Elallah, the Amr Lake Praticha B'Saychsman. Elamai, I said that I paid you even before I finished building my wall. Alma, you see them here. Now you have a right to Rish Lakish. We don't believe him when he said he paid before he finished his parasite wall. Why? Because a person wouldn't have paid it. So you have a right to Rish Lakish against the Bava Rabba. Zok Gemara, shiny hacha, the Amr b'yemer, the Machai b'li Rabbanim. Yes, in the case of a Malvin Aloiva, where I know I'm Chayiv, I know he's a star, I know he has Edom, I know I'm going to have to pay. Yes, there, Zok the Bava Rabba, I might pay early. But here, I don't know the halacha. Right? We said not everybody knows that if you build a parasite wall, it triggers that you're not going to have to pay for 50% of his whole wall. I didn't know that. So why would I pay early? Why would I pay early if I'm not even sure I'll have to pay it then? So therefore, everybody would agree there that a guy would not pay it. Beautiful. Now, what is the halacha l'mais on this case? Rav Papa, Rafuna Bered Rabbi Yeshua of the Kabai Varava. They passed on Kabai Varava, and they said a person will pay early. And Bar Baravashi of it Krishla. My Baravashi passing like Rish Lakish that a person is not believed to say that he paid early. The Hilchot Rish Lakish, we passing like Rish Lakish that before a loan becomes due, it's a chazaka, it's a non-sahadi, it's bodik umunusa that the person didn't pay. What happens? What happens if a loiva dies before the loan becomes due? So Reuben lent Shimon $100,000, and the loan was due January 1st, 2025. And Shimon died before that date. So there's an assumption that Shimon didn't pay, right? Now the halacha is the Malva Reuben could seize that money from Yisraelim because it's in the bank. It's for sure that Shimon didn't pay it. Aboli para. Even though there's a halacha, normally you have to swear if you want to be teveh for nichsa yisoymim that you weren't paid yet. Here, you don't have to even swear it. You know why? Because you have a chazaka lo yovid inish to para begavasim. We paskin like Rish Lakish. We know it's 100% that the loiva didn't pay, and therefore even Yasmi, who you normally protect in every which way, and we force people to swear before they can take from Yisraelim, here you could take from Yisraelim without swearing. Tosha speaks out that the Yisraelim that we're talking about are Yisraelim that are adults, but a Yisraelim that are Ketanim wouldn't have to pay. And that's also a long Tosha. I don't know if we'll have time, but probably won't have time, but let's see now a Shaila that the Gemara asks, which the Rayas to it will have to wait for tomorrow, but listen to the Shaila. Now that we've established that we have a chazaka that a person never pays early, how about this case? What happened is the payment is due January 1st, 2025. So on January 2nd, 2025, Mechi comes and says, Yosy, hey up, you owe me the money, right? I tell Mechi, for Atich money I paid in August. So we normally say there's a chazaka that I'm not believed to say that I paid early, right? But here I have a migu. Mau, mi amrinon, the makam chazaka, amrinon mali l'shaker. I have a beautiful migu. What is the migu, Zakrachi? Ibo, you know what I could have told you, Mechi? I could have told you Pratich Bismali. I could have said I paid it yesterday. I could have said I paid it on January 1st. I didn't have to say I paid it in August. If I would have said I paid January 1st, I would be believed. Now that I admit that I paid it early, normally I shouldn't be believed because it's a chazak against me. But maybe Naman b'Shavua. Maybe I should be believed with the Shavua. Why? Because I have a migu. So do you say Mali Shaker? Oy Dilma going on to Bava Manalif. Oy Dilma the Mokam Chazaka Lo Yamrina Mali Shaker. Maybe when you have such a strong chazaka, you will not believe a migu against such a strong chazaka. Maybe it's almost like Edom. And that is the shiloh that we're going to deal with tomorrow. That's the shiloh here. I'm not sure. So let's see Rashi. I Dilma. Kivan the Muchzik Lod. They know them Parab Sex Manoi. Loyamrinan, but Makam Dik Chazaka. The Marla Debure, Mali Shakav Lanu. So let's see Toisus. We have 3 minutes. We won't be able to do the whole Toisus, but at least we could touch on it a little bit and see some of the details involved. Hiksha Harivam. The Rivam asked the Kasher, the Ribar Mordechai. The Hachazaka Adiva Mishtar. Let's analyze this. This Chazaka would even be stronger than preventing a shtar. How do you know that? The bishtar ain't a goiva ela b'shvu. If you wanted a mon with a shtar, you would actually have to swear. You would have to actually swear that you weren't paid yet. Ubesoich ubahach chazaka. The dich chazaka is even stronger than a shtar because goiva b'loishvu. With this chazaka, I can collect even without a shvua because you're not believed to say that you paid early. If that's the case, once we've established that a chazaka is even stronger than a shtar, what is the shaila over here? We know you don't say miga b'makamedim. If 2 edim could testify that I didn't pay, I don't have a miga. The makam chazaka dadifet. Madich, I'm not believed. Madich chazaka is not believed b'makamedim. Surely I shouldn't be believed the makam chazaka, which is even stronger than edim. The oimeri, the loy kasha klal. This is not a kasha at all. The vadai edim adifi mechazak. Edim is for sure stronger than chazak. How do I know? The amish paroi. What if 2 edim came and said edus that this person paid afilu b'teichazman naked the chazaka. The chazaka is I won't pay early. But 2 edim came and said I did pay early. Potter, about you trust the edim, even though the chazaka says I didn't pay. If edim come along and say I paid, you believe they. V'yamri afilu achaz man yodanu shalei par. And if they said that even after the time, we say normally a person for sure paid up when the time comes. What if edim said no, he didn't pay when it was due? Hayagoiva minay yisoimim below shvua. You would be able to collect from yisoim below shvua. If you have edim, normally you have to swear to the Yosy that you weren't paid yet. But if you have edim that you weren't paid yet, you wouldn't be able to collect. So therefore, and that we said that if you have a shtar to collect, you need to swear. That's because from the shtar itself, you can't tell if he paid or not. You're going to ask me, of course you could tell, because if he paid, I would have given him back the shtar. That's not true, Zaktais. The zimnin desire apshiti the safra. Kedam prepare kama the Bav Mitzira. Remember, we learned that even though you paid me in full on the choiv, I also want you to pay for the expense that I had to pay the cipher to write the shtar. So I'm going to hold on to the shtar until you pay me for that as well. So therefore, it is not such a shtar karaya from the fact that I'm holding the shtar that you owe me the money, and therefore I would have to swear. So therefore, it's still a good shaila if you will say the makam chazaka mali l'shaker, and it's not shver that it's not shver from shtar. Akasha, it's still shver. We better stop here. But so it's just that there's so many. I wanted to learn the stories because there's so many details of how this case could present himself, and these small little nuances make a huge difference. So we'll stop here.